let's alpaca this together. So baby alpaca does not actually mean baby alpacas. It doesn't mean it's softer because it's cuter. And if you've ever knitted with alpaca and wondered why your sweater grew, or why the ribbing relaxed a little bit too much, or why it felt so much warmer than wool, then this video is going to make everything click, because not all alpacas are equal. So let's get into it. If you've ever knit with alpaca and you wondered why your sweater grew, why the ribbing relaxed, or how come it felt so much warmer than wool but it didn't bounce back, the answer isn't that alpaca is unpredictable. It's that alpaca is actually very specific. Most of us never really got educated on the difference. Today we're going to break down the two different breeds of alpaca and why they knit up so differently, what baby alpaca actually means in fiber grading, why alpaca behaves so much differently to wool, and how to end up choosing the right type for the right garment. And once you understand all of this, you'll stop being surprised by your sweaters. So let's start at the beginning. There are two different breeds of alpaca. Most people think that alpaca is actually just one fiber category, but biologically there are two distinct breeds. We have Huacaya and we have Suri. And they don't just look completely different, they grow their little fibers differently. The fiber structure is different, and that structure changes how the fiber's actually behaving. This one is the Huacaya. It has a crimp. Not as much as merino wool, but enough to create a subtle bounce and a bit of loft. That crimp's going to do three very important things. Number one, it traps air, which actually increases warmth. Number two, it creates a softness and a halo. This, by the way, is completely undyed baby alpaca. And number three, it adds a small amount of structural resilience. Huacaya yarn feels very fluffy. It creates that cozy, soft, focused sweater look. So if you've ever knit with alpaca and you've gotten that gentle halo, chances are it was Huacaya. Suri is completely different. Their fibers hang long and they're straight. They align and they have a bit of a shimmer. Suri fiber has far less crimp, and that's going to mean less elasticity, more drape, more fluidity, and more sheen. This cardigan that I'm wearing now is Suri alpaca. It's baby Suri alpaca actually. It behaves almost closer to silk than it does to wool. So when someone says alpaca yarn, they could be talking about something that behaves fluffy and warm, or something that behaves silky and drapey. Now that we understand that alpaca itself isn't one single thing, let's talk about the word baby in baby alpaca, because this is where marketing gets a little bit confusing. Okay, now we're going to get into the part that changed how I understood alpaca completely. Alpaca fiber is structurally different from sheep's wool. Wool fibers, especially merino, have a naturally strong crimp. That crimp acts like little springs. When you stretch wool, those microscopic springs actually stretch out, they extend and they bounce back. Alpaca has far less of that going on, which means it has less elasticity, less bounce back, less structural memory. And that's not a flaw, that's just physics. Now here's the really interesting part. Alpaca fibers are partially hollow. Not like a straw, but they have an internal structure that traps air more than a sheep's wool does. And that's what's trapping the heat, the air. And this is why alpaca feels so warm for its weight. This cardigan I'm wearing now, I'm just wearing a little t-shirt underneath and I feel warm. But it's very, very light. It's very drapey. It's very airy. Extremely lightweight. Very, very warm. So if you've ever picked up an alpaca sweater and asked yourself, why does it feel so light but it's so very warm? It's that hollow structure that's doing the job. And that's actually a good thing, because you can achieve the same thermal structure with less weight. And this is also why alpaca is excellent for lace work. It traps warmth without needing density. Another key difference, alpaca contains very little lanolin compared to wool. Lanolin is the natural oils from the sweat, and some people are sensitive to it, some are even allergic. Alpaca being lower in lanolin is one reason why many people who can't wear wool can actually wear alpaca. But this is important. Softness in alpaca comes down to the diameter and not the word baby. So next we're going to talk about why alpaca grows so much during the blocking process. This is where a lot of knitters get caught off guard. You knit a sweater, it fits perfectly, you wear it 3 times, and then suddenly it's longer, somehow. This is not you, this is, once again, fiber physics. Elasticity basically means the fiber's ability to stretch, and recovery means the fiber's ability to return. Alpaca can stretch, but it has weaker recovery than wool, which means gravity has more influence over time. Think about a long alpaca cardigan. The weight of the garment is pulling downwards. If the fiber doesn't have strong spring back memory, it's slowly just going to pull lower and lower. This is why 100% alpaca often has very lax, unstructured ribbing, because ribbing will rely on elasticity. By the way, my solution for this is to use an elasticated bind-off. What I will do is get elasticated thread that matches the color that I'm working with, and I'll do my cast off using elasticated thread. I can do this also with linen, but let's stay on alpaca. So yeah, wool snaps back and alpaca relaxes. It also drapes, and that's a really good thing. Another important conversation topic here is the fabric's density, because this is going to change its behavior, the gauge density. Loose alpaca fabric equals more growth. Dense alpaca fabric, less movement. This is why understanding fiber behavior changes how you're going to design with it. For example, the cardigan I'm wearing now, I knitted out each part and I steam blocked each section as I went so that I could get a very true idea of exactly how big and how long it was going to end up and where it was going to sit on my body. Prior to steaming out all of these stitches, they were crimped up like this, and this whole cardigan was a lot smaller. Next, we're going to talk about Huacaya versus Suri. Now let's zoom back into the breed differences, because Huacaya and Suri don't just look different on the animal, they behave very differently in the fabric. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about Huacaya in knitting. What does Huacaya actually look like when we knit it up? This, by the way, is a Huacaya sweater. It's a baby alpaca Huacaya cardigan. I'm going to get into what baby alpaca actually means. I touched on it earlier, but we didn't go into it in too much depth, so I will do that. But for now, we're just going to talk about what does Huacaya actually look like when we knit it up. Huacaya yarns tend to feel very lofty and very fluffy in the hand. This has got to do with those tiny pockets of air that are trapped inside of the fiber. And as we already covered, the air traps heat. So Huacaya tends to feel very warm for its weight. This particular cardigan is held with 2 strands double, and I can confirm it's extremely warm, like very warm. If I go outside in, say, 0 degrees with a chilly wind and I'm just wearing this and maybe like a light windbreaker over it, I still feel sufficiently warm. Right now, actually, it's fairly warm inside our house. It's 19 degrees and I'm a little bit warm, but I wanted to show you this cardigan as a real life example. So all of these qualities are qualities that knitters really love. Another thing Huacaya does really well is stitch blooming. When Huacaya yarn is washed and blocked, the stitches will expand slightly. It softens out the fabric and it fills out all of these little stitches. It also typically has a gentle halo. This is why you will find it's often used for things like sweaters, winter accessories, textured garments, and of course my favorite, cables, because it tends to hold its shape. It's still alpaca, so it doesn't have a lot of stretch or recovery, but it's still a little more resilient than Suri is. So Suri, on the other hand, behaves quite differently once it's spun into yarn. Because those fibers are longer, smoother, and much more aligned, it tends to feel silkier and more fluid, definitely more drapey, like a downward drape. So like I mentioned, it creates a fabric that is very similar to silk or even viscose, and almost nothing like traditional wool. It's often used for garments where this kind of a drape is desired. Shawls, lightweight cardigans, kind of like the typewriter cardigan I just made. Elegant, flowing garments with a subtle glow. So if knitters are talking about alpaca being drapey, they're probably referring to Suri, even if they don't realize it. So now we're going to get into what makes baby alpaca a baby alpaca. So what makes baby alpaca a baby alpaca? Let's answer this question properly. It definitely doesn't mean that it came from a baby. It does mean that it comes from a particular diameter of the fiber. In fiber science, softness is measured in microns, which basically means how thick or how thin is the individual strand of the fiber. The smaller the micron, the finer the fiber, and the finer the fiber, the softer it is. For alpaca, the grading system generally looks like this. We have royal alpaca, which is under 19 microns, baby alpaca, which ranges between 20 and 23 microns, superfine alpaca, which is ranging between 23 and 26, and then your regular schmegular alpaca, which is 26 and up. So when you see baby paca on a yarn label, for example, it means that the fiber has been sorted so that only fibers within that finer micron range are used. And that's what's creating that soft next to skin feel. Another interesting fact is that alpaca fleece is not uniform across its body. The finest fibers usually come from the blanket area, which is the back and the sides of the alpaca, where the fleece grows softer and more condensed. During processing, those fibers are then sorted and graded, and if they fall into that finer micron range, they become what we call baby alpaca. So you can have baby alpaca, Huacaya and Suri. The word baby is just describing the fiber grade, not the age. Another factor that dramatically changes how alpaca behaves in knitting is spinning. The spinning method determines how the fibers sit inside of the yarn. Two common spinning styles are woolen spun or worsted spun. Woolen spun alpaca traps more air inside the fiber, which tends to make it feel lighter, loftier, warmer, and slightly more fuzzy. Woolen spun alpaca often produces that soft, cozy halo people often associate with fluffy sweaters. Worsted spun alpaca often aligns the fibers a little bit more neatly before spinning, which is creating smoother, denser, more drape, and more defined stitch definition. So two yarns can both be alpaca, both be Huacaya, but behave very differently depending on how they were spun. Next, we're going to chat a little bit about halo behavior. Alpaca behaves a little differently to mohair. Mohair creates a very dramatic glowing halo because the fibers stick outwards more strongly. Alpaca halo tends to be softer and a bit more diffused. Instead of sparkling outward, it gently softens the edges of the stitches, creating that soft, cozy, blurred fabric appearance. A lot of designers will choose alpaca especially for this. Another interesting thing about alpaca is it tends to respond to humidity. Like most natural fibers, alpaca can absorb moisture from the air. When that happens, the fibers relax slightly, which can make a garment feel a little softer or looser on more humid days. Wool behaves similarly, but because alpaca already has a lower elasticity, the effect can sometimes be a bit more noticeable. Next, we're going to chat a little bit about blocking alpaca. Blocking alpaca works a little differently to blocking wool. Because alpaca has a weaker recovery than wool, the shape that you create during blocking tends to hold. If you stretch alpaca aggressively during blocking, it may hold that shape. You can keep that in mind if something's ever too small. So with alpaca, gently blocking is always recommended. So it's often recommended that instead of doing a very aggressive wet block, what you could do is a steam block or a spritzy block with your garment stretched into place, or even just a very quick wet block, and then take it out quite carefully, because once you get it into that shape, it's going to stay that shape. But that means you can also control that. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about alpaca blends. You'll often see alpaca blended with other fibers. For example, this is a blend of baby Suri alpaca, we've got merino, and we've got silk. Blending isn't just about cost, it also makes the fiber behave completely differently. Alpaca with wool is going to add elasticity and structure. Alpaca and silk is perfect for drape and sheen. Alpaca and nylon, very durable. Blending alpaca yarns allows one to keep alpacas warm and softness while adjusting the stability of the yarn. And then we're going to chat about fiber length. Another interesting aspect of alpaca is its staple length. Alpaca fibers are often longer than many sheep wool fibers. It contains something called guard fibers or guard hairs. Guard as in G-U-A-R-D. These are coarser fibers that help protect the animal in its natural environment. High quality alpaca yarns often remove these fibers. That's one of the reasons luxury alpacas feel so much softer. So, when choosing an alpaca yarn for your project, the important question isn't just, is it alpaca? It's actually going to be, what breed? What fiber grade? How is it spun? Is it blended? So, the next time you pick up a skein of alpaca, and once you understand all of these variables, you will stop being surprised by your sweaters. Soft sweaters, hard science. And that's it, guys. In closing, I'm just gonna quickly show you today's knit fit and tell you where you can find it as per usual. And then in next week's vlog, I'm gonna walk you through the typewriter cardigan, which I just released. Over here, past my little fluffy, we have the Christmas cables cardigan available on my website. Very, very cute. I would say advanced beginner friendly cardigan with cables, maybe intermediate. This is with baby alpaca from Imagine, 100% fully undyed, beautiful, ethically sourced, gorgeous alpaca. And then we have my typewriter cardigan. This sample is made with Ching Melted Baby Suri. The pattern is over on my website. And yeah, like I said, in my next vlog, I'm gonna break that pattern down quite thoroughly for all of you. I'm not gonna go into the math of how to make one for yourself because I did put a lot of work into the pattern, so all of that information is there. But what I will do is walk through the pattern if, say, you already have it, and explain to you what I mean by each step. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this alpaca deep dive, and I really hope I see you again soon. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, liking, or letting me know your thoughts. Until next time, bye!